Buckle up, folks, because today we're taking a deep dive into a real head-scratcher of a case. We're headed to Howard Crossing, Wyoming.
A place where, well, the lines between the ordinary and the extraordinary get a little blurry.
Exactly. It's a case that blends claims of UFO sightings, a pretty audacious financial scheme, and a whole lot of unwavering faith.
And the kicker is this isn't just some, sci-fi movie plot.
Oh, no, this actually happened. These events were investigated. They were documented.
And they offer, I think, a really unique window into how people try to process the extraordinary, especially when it bumps right up against their everyday lives.
We're basing our deep dive on a transcript called The Howard Crossing Incident.
Which, by the way, reads like, well, it's got the twists and turns of a good suspense novel.
Yeah, it really does. So let's start with the Carlsons.
Okay.
Multi-generational ranching family living in Wyoming. Imagine, right, you're living this simple life, you're deeply rooted in your faith, and all of a sudden, your world is flipped upside down. You're seeing mysterious lights.
Strange creatures.
Yeah, lurking around your property.
The Carlsons, and especially the daughter Jeannie, reported seeing a white ball of light.
Wow.
Landing near their ranch. And later on, the whole family claims they saw these, well, beings they couldn't explain. What's striking is how insistent they were that this all really happened.
Yeah.
Even though there's really no physical evidence to back up their claims.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Mr. Carlson is described as, a man of deep faith.
Right.
Impeccable honesty, like a real pillar of his community. So it makes you wonder, why would a man like that, with such strong morals, make up a story like this?
Well, the transcript does mention that the family was having some financial struggles.
Oh, okay.
At the time. So you have to ask, was there maybe, a motive for a hoax? Were they desperate enough to, I don't know, invent this UFO thing to get attention, maybe even some kind of financial help?
Yeah.
It's certainly a possibility. But at the same time, the transcript also makes a point of highlighting that Mr. Carlson refused to make any money off of their story. Like, he repeatedly turned down interviews, book deals, all of that. He insisted that all he wanted to do was share the truth as he saw it.
Okay, so we have a family claiming this close encounter, but there's no hard proof. But get this.
Okay.
At the same time this is all going down, there's another strange story unfolding in Howard Crossing. A flying saucer factory.
Oh, what?
Yeah, that's what I said. A flying saucer factory that promised investors unbelievable wealth.
Okay, that sounds a little,
I know, right? Sounds almost too out there to be true.
Yeah.
But it happened. Really happened.
So how does a flying saucer factory even get started?
That's where a woman named Greta Marshall comes into the picture.
Okay.
Her husband, Alex, he gets completely caught up in this whole venture.
Oh, boy.
At first, she's skeptical, obviously, but she gets more and more worried as Alex starts pouring their savings into this so-called flying saucer factory.
So who's behind this factory?
A guy named Mr. Cochran. Charismatic, but kind of shady, if you know what I mean.
Sounds like it.
It does, right? And it gets even crazier. Alex ends up getting a second mortgage on their house just to invest more money.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It sounds like a classic scam, right?
Promising the moon and delivering an empty bank account.
Exactly. But what makes this even weirder is the technology Cochran claimed to be using. Antimatter.
Wait, hold on. Antimatter, like the stuff of science fiction.
Yep. Straight out of a sci-fi novel. And that's how he hooked people. Played on their desire to get rich, their fascination with the unknown.
Cochran was a master manipulator, wasn't he?
Oh, absolutely. He whispered about government contracts. He created this aura of exclusivity around the whole thing, and people bought it. Hundreds of them.
I bet.
Lost their life savings. So while the Carlsons are having their alleged UFO experience, this scam is playing out right under everyone's noses. And guess who gets involved?
Let me guess. The Air Force.
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah.
But not because of the UFO sightings,
Yeah.
at least not directly.
Oh, so there's another layer to this.
There is. You see, the Air Force, through their Project Blue Book, was tasked with investigating UFO reports, sure, but they were also monitoring potential technological threats.
Makes sense.
And Cochran's bragging about advanced technology and government contracts, well, that raised some red flags.
Oh, I bet.
It really is a fascinating intersection of these two seemingly unrelated events, both happening against the backdrop of the Cold War.
Right.
And, a growing public fascination with UFOs.
A lot of paranoia in the air at that time.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Air Force decides to send in an undercover agent. They want to get the goods on Cochran. What they find is shocking.
What did they find?
You ready for this? The saucer they're building in this factory. It's a prop
A prop.
from an old sci-fi film.
Oh, wow. Talk about a letdown.
I know, right? The Air Force, working with the FBI, shut the whole operation down. Cochran gets arrested. And the scale of this scam,
Had to be huge.
it was hundreds of victims, millions of dollars gone. This case really shows you the danger of blind faith.
Especially when it comes to your money.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes you think, was there a connection between the Carlsons and Cochran's scam, or was it all just a crazy coincidence?
It's a good question. Were the Carlsons swept up in the same kind of belief that fueled Cochran's scheme, or was their experience something completely different?
So we're back, digging deeper into the Howard Crossing incident. Remember, this is all real, not just some made-up story.
We left off with the Air Force shutting down Cochran's, his fake flying saucer factory, exposing him as the con man he was.
Yeah, preying on people's dreams like that.
It's a reminder that things aren't always as they seem, and sometimes the truth can be stranger and a lot more disappointing than fiction.
While the authorities were dealing with Cochran and his scheme, remember the Carlsons?
Yeah.
The Air Force investigators looking into their UFO claims, well, they finally gave the family their findings, and it wasn't good news.
I can imagine the disappointment. This family, so convinced they had seen something incredible, something nobody could explain.
Mm-hmm.
And the Air Force comes back and says, nope, no physical evidence to support your story.
The only thing they had was that broken window at the ranch.
Right. Which the family swore was caused by the UFO landing.
But of course, the investigators weren't buying it. They figured there was a much more ordinary explanation.
But here's the thing. Despite the lack of proof, the Air Force dismissing their story, the Carlsons, they never changed their minds. They were adamant that they saw something that night.
It's in the transcript. There's this really powerful moment where Jeannie, the daughter who first saw the white ball of light, she begs the investigators to believe her.
Wow.
She describes her experience so passionately, saying it doesn't matter what explanations they come up with, she knows what she saw.
Makes you think about the nature of belief, doesn't it?
It really does.
Like, can a shared experience, especially in a close family like the Carlsons, make a belief so strong even when there's no hard proof?
And how does faith play into all of this? The Carlsons, they were deeply religious. And that seems to have influenced how they saw these events.
Definitely.
You know, the psychologist who interviewed the family, Dr. Forrest, he suggests that their recent revival meeting, on top of their strong faith, could make them more suggestible, more likely to see ordinary things as extraordinary.
That's interesting.
It shows how our beliefs and what we expect can really change how we see things.
Then you have Mr. Carlson, a man who was, from all accounts, incredibly honest, and he refused to profit from their story, even though his family was struggling financially.
Right.
It's almost like he wanted to keep their experience separate from the greed and deception that was going on with Cochran's scam.
It's a stark contrast to Alex Marshall, remember him? Blinded by the idea of getting rich, willing to risk everything on Cochran's scheme.
Yeah.
For Alex, that flying saucer represented a way out, a way to achieve something extraordinary.
And when that dream is shattered, well, the disillusionment can be crushing.
Absolutely. It's this human need for the extraordinary, for something beyond our understanding that ties together the different parts of this whole story.
Yeah, you have the Carlsons holding on to their belief, despite the lack of evidence, their faith unshaken.
And then there's Alex, whose belief was all about greed, destroyed when Cochran's scam was revealed.
It's amazing how the transcript shows these different views on belief.
It really highlights how complex belief is. It can be a source of comfort, but it can also be used to deceive.
Just when you think you've got a handle on this strange story, it takes another turn. We shift focus to Major Gatlin, one of the Air Force investigators. He's on the flight back from Howard Crossing, exhausted, trying to process everything he's seen and heard. But he can't shake this uneasy feeling.
Sounds like he's having second thoughts.
He starts to wonder, could there be more to the Carlson story than he initially thought? It's this internal battle he's having between logic, evidence,
and his gut feeling that something isn't quite right.
It really reflects the bigger theme we're looking at here, doesn't it?
It does.
Where do you draw the line between belief and skepticism? Between trusting your intuition and relying on proof?
It's a tough question.
And then, as if to highlight this very dilemma, a passenger on Major Gatlin's flight. She suddenly shouts out, points frantically out the window. She's convinced she's seeing a flying saucer.
Oh, wow.
You can feel the tension, right? The other passengers, they get caught up in the fear, the excitement of the unknown.
I can only imagine.
But the pilot, Cool as a cucumber, a real veteran, he calmly checks out what's going on. Turns out, what the passenger thought was a flying saucer was just the reflection of the full moon,
Really?
distorted by the clouds and the plane's movement. Classic example of how our perceptions can play tricks on us.
Especially when we're already expecting to see something specific.
Exactly. It's like our brains try to fill in the gaps, create patterns and meaning, even when there might not be any. And we're back, wrapping up our deep dive into the Howard Crossing incident. Remember, this isn't just some story we made up. This actually happened to real people whose lives were touched by some pretty extraordinary events, some of them deceptive, and also the enduring power of belief.
We left off with that tense moment on Major Gatlin's flight where a passenger was absolutely certain she saw a flying saucer.
And the pilot calmly explained it away as just a simple optical illusion.
It makes you think, doesn't it? How much of what we experience as reality is actually influenced by what we expect or we want to see, maybe even our fears.
Right. And where does faith fit into all of this? The Carlsons, they never wavered in their belief about their UFO encounter, even when everyone was skeptical. It shows how deeply faith can shape how we understand the world.
Yeah, and it's interesting how the transcript presents these different sides of belief. You have the Carlsons, whose faith seems to make their belief even stronger. And then you have Alex Marshall, whose blind faith in Cochrane's scheme, well, it led to his financial ruin.
And speaking of Alex, the transcript says he didn't take the news of Cochrane's arrest and the scam being exposed very well. He was furious, convinced that the Air Force had cheated him out of a fortune. He even threatened to sue, still clinging to that belief that Cochrane's antimatter technology was real.
His reaction, even though it might seem irrational, it really tells you something about the psychology of belief. It's not always about logic or evidence. Sometimes it's deeply connected to our hopes and dreams, our desire for something better. For Alex, that flying saucer was a chance to escape his ordinary life, to achieve something amazing. And when that dream is shattered, well, it can be really devastating.
So where does that leave us at the end of our deep dive into the Howard Crossing incident? We've looked at these real-life events that blend the unexplained with this very human desire for wealth and, well, a yearning for something more than the everyday.
This case gives us a fascinating glimpse into how complicated belief is, how it can shape what we see, influence our choices, and drive our actions.
It's also a cautionary tale about the dangers of blind faith, especially when it comes to money. Cochrane and his flying saucer factory, they prove that not everything that shines is gold.
But maybe the most important thing we can take away from the Howard Crossing incident is the question it raises about truth itself. In a world overflowing with information, misinformation, and everything in between, how do we figure out what's real? Do we trust our senses, our intuition, our faith? Or do we rely on evidence, logic, what other people tell us is true?
That's a great question. If you were in a situation like the one in Howard Crossing, what would you believe? Would you be swayed by what eyewitnesses said, like the Carlsons? Would the promise of wealth and amazing technology like what Cochrane offered tempt you? Or would you be skeptical, looking for proof and rational explanations before you made up your mind?
Those are questions worth thinking about, not just when it comes to UFOs and scams, but in every part of our lives. Because being able to tell the difference between truth and lies, to think critically and evaluate information, well, that's more important now than ever.
We encourage everyone listening to dig a little deeper into Project Blue Book and other investigations into UFO sightings throughout history. Explore the many ways people have tried to understand the unexplained. And maybe, as you do, you'll gain a deeper understanding not only of the world around you, but also of yourself and the beliefs that shape your own point of view.